All right, best practices. So there are three main places that I think of to go to for professional organizations and oral history. The first and most obvious one for us in the United States is the Oral History Association. That is where the majority of resources and best practices are that we'll be referencing throughout this webinar. And in fact, there's a resource note with two different resources at the bottom of this slide for you to check out. We'll also have a resource slide at the end that gathers all of these together. So um, please don't feel like you have to scribble this down real quick. It'll be on the slides at the end. And then once we do have those oral history interviews, there is the work of transcription and access. And for the most part, that usually falls under the domain of the Society of American Archivists and the descriptive practices put in place there. And then the National Council on Public History as well, oral histories, as part of their unique nature, can fall very much under the archives practice, but also falls under the public history practice. So we have some different professional organizations that we can lean on and use for the resources that they have available. When thinking about best practices, there's a couple different areas. And so topically, I just want you to be aware of each. First and most obvious is best practices related to how to prepare for and conduct an interview. When most people think about oral history, all they think about is that interview, even though there's much more work both before and after that. The second one I want you to think about is how to preserve an oral history collection. This particular area will most likely fall under the archives professional organization and resources. For the most part, if you're dealing with creating current day oral history interviews, you will need to think about digital preservation. Or if you're working with oral history interviews that have been conducted 10, 20, 50 years ago, you may be dealing with outdated media and you will need to likely migrate those so that you have a digital copy as well. And then, of course, third, and certainly not least here, is how to manage, describe, and provide access to these oral history items, just as you would for any sort of museum or archive collection that would be open for research and public engagement. And for this particular one, you may be falling under the archive side for archives, management, descriptive access best practices, or you may be falling under that public history or museum studies domain and the best practices that they have available there. The good news is, no matter which field or domain you fall in, many of the best practices are in alignment or reflective of one another, so there's really not a bad one to go with. Just be aware of the different types of best practices that we've listed here.